22nd. So I will go ahead and say welcome on behalf of the Indiana Arts Commission. I'm Paige Sharp and I'm the Deputy Director of Programs for the agency. And welcome to the FY23 Arts Project Support Application Workshop, which is presented by our regional arts partners. We couldn't possibly provide such incredible broad access to this valuable program without their help. And we're truly grateful for our regional arts partners. Commitment, dedication, and experience. You'll be in great hands today as you learn about this year's program. And with that, I invite Kayla Myers, our partner for Region 2, to get you started.
Thanks, Paige. So for some general housekeeping announcements, we are recording today's webinar, which will be emailed to you later this week. We ask that all participants please mute themselves throughout the presentation, and questions can be typed into the chat box. We will also allow a few minutes for questions at the end of the presentation. If you need accommodations for the grant guidelines or the online application, please contact the IAC's Accessibility Coordinator, Stephanie Haynes, as shown on the screen. Live captioning is being offered during this webinar. You can turn on your captions in the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. If you need help with captions or any accessibility during this webinar, please send a private chat to Chape and Snick. Based on population, the IAC has divided our state into 11 different regions. Typically, these workshops are done at the regional level, but the pandemic has provided an opportunity to work together more in recent years. At the end of the presentation, we will provide contact information for all of the regional arts partners, so you can identify yours if you're not familiar. As Paige noted, I'm the partner for Region 2, and additional regional arts partners will be joining me. Ann Fields Monaco from Region 4, Philip Slane from Region 3, Ailey McGill from Region 7, and Ann McKim from Region 10. And also the IAC's Grants, Research, and Technology Manager, Chape and Snick, will be presenting the IAC's online grant system. So for today's agenda, we will be covering information about the FY23 Arts Project Support Grant Program. Specifically, we'll be covering the program timeline, what's new this year, application information, the evaluation criteria. We'll also view the online grant system and application, and we'll go through some grant writing tips and resources. And we will finish up with grant recognition and advocacy and some other funding opportunities. So Arts Project Support grants provide funding to Indiana 501c3 nonprofit organizations and public entities for a specific arts project or arts activities. Some examples of eligible projects include a one-time event, a single performance, an exhibition, an educational workshop, or series of related arts activities such as art classes or training sessions that are open to the public, whether free or for a fee. And this program provides grant awards of up to $5,000. There are a wide range of projects that take place across the state through this program. In the chat box, if you'd like, please feel free to type in your project name with a very brief description if it's not apparent from the project name. And I'll give you a minute to do so. Again, so if you would like to share your project name, feel free to do so in the chat. Okay, seeing a couple come in.
There's so much diversity. I'm excited.
Thank you. So hopefully seeing some of these projects gives a sense of the variety throughout the state and some ideas for those of you that aren't as familiar with this program, and hopefully you can scroll through and take a peek at some of those. So for the FY23 program timeline, the funding period is from July 1st, 22 and June 30th, 23. The deadline to request a draft application review from your regional arts partner is February 23rd of 22. Please note priority for draft reviews will be given to first-time applicants. The application is due March 9th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. We of course suggest you submit a few days early if at all possible. Evaluation panels will be held in late April 22. These do vary by region, and your regional arts partner will provide you with the specific date prior to your panel. And then the award notification will be sent by early July 22 through email. The first payment, which is 75% of the grant award, is typically deposited late September to early October 22, as long as your paperwork is turned into the IAC. And then the final grant report for this year will be due July 13th of 23 at the end of the fiscal year. And then the final payment, which is 25% of the award, will be processed July or August 23 after your final grant report is submitted and reviewed. So what's new in FY23? This year, the IAC will prioritize funding new applicants. And if awarded funding, organizations will be required to obtain a unique entity identifier or UEI prior to payment. Since 2010, this has been a Dun and Bradstreet number or DUNS. And in April 22, the federal government will switch to the use of a UEI created in SAM.gov to be the official UEI. The IAC will provide easy to follow guidance on this in the coming months, but we did want to make you aware. Also, funding cannot be used for projects already supported by the IAC. So therefore, multiple applicants for the same project are not accepted. Updated expense eligibility for FY23 loosens restrictions on capital expenditures to encourage use of funds for accessibility or other project critical needs. There is also an increased emphasis on accessibility, which will be covered more later in the evaluation criteria section of the presentation. The IAC does have an accessibility resource page that we would recommend checking out. This includes FAQs, a self-assessment checklist, myths, and compliance methods. And then some important requirements continuing from fiscal year 22. So there is no match requirement this year. This means it's critical that all of your project expenses are considered eligible. FY22 Arts Project Support grantees that extended their project into FY23, so after June 30th, 22, cannot apply for FY23 APS funding. And then priority will be given to supporting local or Indiana artists through projects that will directly financially benefit or support the work of these artists. And I'm going to turn it back over to Paige Sharp from the IAC to elaborate a bit more on the definition and prioritization of Indiana artists.
Great, happy to provide a little bit more detail there. So how we prioritize artists specifically in this program is around the evaluation criteria. So it's ask a maximum of 10 points. So it's also, I do want to be very specific. It is for Indiana artists. It doesn't mean that the application would do poorly because you don't use an Indiana artist, but it could score a little bit more poorly in that specific area of the rating that panelists are required to do as a part of a fair evaluation process. So everybody uses the same process for each of the applicants. With regard to defining what is an artist, we use the definitions of disciplines from the National Endowment for the Arts. So that would be an artist in dance, music, opera, visual arts, theater arts, design, crafts, photography, media like audio, film, video, literature. And it could be multidisciplinary. It could be multiple art forms that an artist is conversant in. Or it could be also a traditional artist, a folk artist, an art form that's been passed down for generations. It doesn't mean the artist has to be making their living full-time as an artist. There are many people who, they're just creators. I don't consider myself an artist, but I love fiber arts. I'm a crochet. I guess I could say I'm a crochet artist. So it depends on what the need of your project is, and finding somebody who's really conversant in working at that art form to share an understanding and advance that art form. If you do have specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your regional arts partner. They can always ask me, and we can always update the applications to provide a little bit more clarity in that section as well. And that's it.
Thanks, Paige. So before we take a look at the application itself, Anne, Philip, and Anne will review the evaluation criteria that will be used to score your application.
Thanks, Kayla. I'm Anne McKim. I'm the Regional Arts Partner for Region 10, which is a 10-county region down here in southwestern Indiana. We are delighted to see all of you on the Zoom today. Your work is really helping the IAC fulfill its mission of getting art throughout the state accessible and available to everyone. So thank you. Now we'll take a look at the rubric that panelists will use to score your application. Just so you understand, our panelists are recruited by region by your regional arts partners. So these are folks who hopefully have a good understanding of the spaces that you're working within. However, they are limited to the information that you share in your application. And so even if they might be familiar with your organization, are judging based on what you submit. There are 100 points possible with a minimum score of 75 for funding. A written list of these criteria can be found in the evaluation criteria PDF on the IAC's website, as well as by clicking links within the application itself. The criteria sheet aligns directly with application questions, which should make it easy for your own application review. The first area panelists will score is artistic quality. They will look at the extent to which your project demonstrates a committed effort to provide your audience a meaningful, impactful, authentic, and quality artistic experience or experiences. Because each application is reviewed individually, panelists will score this selection relative to the budget size of your organization. Again, this is from the evaluation criteria sheet that you can download and save for your reference. First, scoring for artistic quality is based on the extent to which you demonstrate that this is an artistic project with clear objectives, purpose, or goals. If this project has been done before, you will want to show that you are using past experience to inform this year's project. The project description and artistic documents demonstrate that the project will provide the audience a meaningful, impactful, and quality artistic or authentic experience. I counsel applicants in my region to take advantage of the Regional Art Partner Review specifically to address the clarity of artistic objectives and goals. An excellent example of this within my region is a project featuring public art that was awarded its first APS grant in FY22. The applicant was able to clearly articulate the artistic quality of the experience for the public attending this public art experience or event, in addition to the quality of the art created after careful consideration. I also encourage people to consider the ways that they are evaluating the art that is being presented. Consider using independent jurors or experts from within the fields or disciplines that you are highlighting. I was looking a little bit through the projects suggested in the chat, and so when I see things like film festivals, share information on how the films are being selected for your program. This is how we know that the highest quality is truly being considered for inclusion. And there are so many good projects in there. I'm really excited to dig more into that. Artist support. So Paige did speak a bit about the definition of Indiana artists. Artist support is the extent to which an artist will directly financially benefit from the project, and or the extent to which the project focus is to financially benefit artists. A helpful example here is that of a music festival. While there are many aspects that are included in hosting a large event, successful applicants will direct IAC funding towards the payment of artists or the arts in the festival. I think Philip is ready to take us to community engagement and IDEA.
Thank you, Anne. Yes, so my name is Phil Slane. I'm the Regional Arts Partner for Region 3. That's essentially the counties that are located up in the northeast corner of Indiana. Yeah, the next thing we're going to look at here is community engagement and idea, which is essentially the extent to which there is an active, two-way, ongoing relationship between both the applicant and the community as it relates to planning, participation, and evaluation of the proposed activities, which includes intentional strategies for inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. This is a particularly important area for me, and one that I think we tend to get a lot of questions about. One of the things that I like to keep in mind as it relates to community engagement and idea is the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's really what this section is about, is building relationships and partnerships with the community to really increase your impact. So looking at this particular section, applications and their scoring is based on the extent to which underserved communities will benefit from the project, the extent to which the project is developed with and not for the identified communities it will serve. Within that particular area, it should be clear the community is an ongoing part of the project as it relates to collaboration, planning teams, leaders from the communities actively involved, things of that nature. It's also based on the extent to which the applicant has intentional idea strategies. So again, inclusivity, diversity, equity, and access to increase access, address barriers that might exist, diversify participants, or provide accessibility accommodations for underserved communities, as well as the extent to which the applicant has a clear process for measuring the project's impact. And lastly, the extent to which the marketing materials and social media and web presence reflect those they seek to serve and projected participation figures seem reasonable. I pulled a couple of examples from Region 3 for this particular area, just to kind of give you a general sense of what we're looking for here. One is the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace. It's an organization that really strives to create opportunities to recognize the diverse political and religious backgrounds of Middle Eastern communities, as well as creating opportunities to engage dialogue and partnerships between Muslim and Christian communities in Northeast Indiana. So lots of opportunities within that particular realm for partnerships and collaboration, especially as it relates to underserved and underrecognized communities here in Northeast Indiana. Another one is the Japanese American Association, which applies each year for funding for the annual Cherry Blossom Festival to celebrate traditional Japanese culture and an active participation with the communities and organizations that represent this culture within Fort Wayne and Northeast Indiana. So really creating a platform in collaboration with those organizations and individuals to make sure that there is representation for that culture here within the region. And the last example that I have is East Allen County Schools here in Allen County. Each year they partner with a local arts organization called Heartland Sings to present a year-long arts integrated residency program that focuses on making the art form of opera more accessible to underserved and minority students, while also helping them to achieve goals in the area of English language and literature. It's a fantastic partnership, kind of an example of not necessarily a partnership to increase access to underserved communities, but really amplifying the extent to which East Allen County Schools can provide opportunities like that for their students who may not necessarily have activities and opportunities such as that outside of the school environment. One of the things I think that's really important to keep in mind as it relates to community engagement and idea is to start having these conversations and building these relationships prior to submitting your application. The more that you can show us that there is an active conversation that's already in progress, the more it's going to help your application, but the more it's also going to benefit your project by being able to start to figure out where some of those partnerships lie and how you can really connect with other organizations within the community to increase the impact of your particular project or program. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to our other regional arts partner, Ann Fields-Monaco.
Thank you so much, Philip. I think those were really great examples you shared of community engagement. So thank you for sharing those. But like Phil said, I am Ann Fields Monaco. I'm from Region 4, which is in North Central Indiana. Think Lafayette, West Lafayette, and then some of the rural counties surrounding us. So if you're from that region, hello. The last set of criteria that we're going to look at today is the project management section. The panelists will basically be evaluating the likelihood that the project is going to do what you say it's going to do. And so panelists will be scoring the extent to which you demonstrate the ability to successfully design and implement the project through effective planning, financial management, staffing, and evaluation. So if you have an awesome program staff or a really great planning committee of volunteers, now's the time to really toot your own horn. In this section of the application, you will be asked to provide information about who's going to make the project happen. You'll need to provide a project timeline, and you'll also need to provide a project budget. Scoring of the project management section will be based on several factors. The first is the extent to which there is staffing to carry out the project. And mind you, that doesn't mean paid staff. That just means you have the human resources to make it happen. And the lead staff, especially if you're doing a special program that involves like arts education or a specific art form, they're going to want to see that the people leading any types of programming or planning for the program are appropriately experienced for the project. So in addition to a general staffing overview, you're really going to want to include the title, the role, responsibilities, and then relevant experience of the lead project manager. Or again, it could be the lead volunteer who's in charge of the committee. It's okay if you don't have a paid staff member in charge of things. If you're working through a committee or lead volunteer, mention their credentials. Maybe they have experience planning a festival from another community and they're now in your community working on something similar. It doesn't have to be formal, educational degrees or experience of that nature. Panelists will also be looking at when you are asked, are you able to provide an appropriate planning process and timeline? So you're going to want to be sure that your timeline includes your community engagement strategies that you've been asked about earlier. Panelists are going to know, well, when exactly are you engaging the communities you're hoping to develop the project with? So if you are going to have a focus group or engage with stakeholders in some other way, make sure you show them. In March, we will start that process. Please note that while the panelists are evaluating you based on this section, it is okay if you have to reschedule or shift timelines when you're actually implementing the project. I know as a regional arts partner, that is something organizations often panic about when they actually get the grant. They're really worried about that. And so I wanted to just make sure you all were aware that we realize small things change, but as long as you're doing the project you say you're going to do and the goals are staying the same, it'll be okay if the project has to be rescheduled as long as it's within the funding period of July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. And then the last section of project management, we'll be actually looking at the financials. So you may be asked within your application to submit a financial statement. So if applicable, we'll want to see whether you have the capacity to do a project, right? Do you have funds available? How much of the project maybe rests on, grant funds? The project budget also will need to be submitted and it needs to be well considered and reasonable. And so within the application, you're going to be asked to submit these things. And specific to the project budget, you're going to need to know the amount of funding you are requesting from the IAC. Because a one-to-one match is not required for this grant period, the maximum amount you can request is $5,000, and that technically could be allowable to be your only income for the this year's grant program. However, I think one of the considerations panelists may make, though, is where other funding support may be coming from within your community. But in other words, it's allowable for you to have that be the sole project income, but it will probably look better to panelists if you're able to demonstrate there is community support for your project. You will also be asked to submit an itemized project budget, and you'll basically be typing that text into the box. So that could be things like, we're spending $100 on program printing. Artist fees are going to be $500, and you'll just simply type these into a box. The project budget should only consist of project-related income and expenses that will occur during the FY23 grant period. So again, that's July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. And this budget, when you submit it, should be balanced, meaning that the net income at the very bottom should be budgeted at 0. In other words, you're going to need to make sure the total cash income and total cash expense figures are the same number. You will also be asked to provide the total anticipated in-kind support. So examples of in-kind support include donated services, time, and other types of non-cash contributions. So if you're getting a free $500 ad in your local newspaper, you could count that as $500 of in-kind support. Or if you have a project consultant who is donating their time as a volunteer, you could include their contribution by multiplying the number of hours they're working for you times the rate they would normally charge. So these, again, are ways of calculating your in-kind support, which the application will ask for. But it's okay, again, if it's 0. This is one area where you don't have to have in-kind support. You'll need to consult the guidelines for eligible and ineligible expenses. But of course, if none of that makes sense, or if you know something you're still not clear, please contact your regional arts partner. And so with that, that is the project management section. And now we get to actually take a look at the application. So I'd like to introduce the IAC's Grants Research and Technology Manager and knower of all things related to this online grant system, Chapin. She'll show us the application.
Hello, and thank you for that introduction. Switch to the view of the application. So in the chat box, I am going to throw the actual application link. You probably already have access to it, but now you got it again. So when you get to the kind of home login page, many of you already have an account, but I do just want to call your attention to the side where I kind of break down if you are a returning applicant and you're not sure of a login, you can always click that forget your password link. If you're not sure if your organization has applied before, we do ask that you either, as it says on this page, reach out to me or your regional art partner, because preferably we won't have more than one for the same organization. And that allows us to have a history of all of your grant requests over time associated with one account. So let's just say you have your account created, and I'm going to use my personal account for this. We'll note that right away, I don't have an apply option at the top. And that's because some of us may also have served as a panelist for the IAC. So I just want to call your attention up to the top right, where I have a drop down that I can toggle. And so since in this case, I want to apply, I'm going to click applicant. So that's going to load. And since I've started an application, you'll notice that right on the home screen here, I do have an active request because I was playing in the APS application. And then it also lists my historical requests. So if, like me, you've applied to something in the past, you will be able to view that. You can check out, actually view the old application. If you do that, you can download it. There's an application packet. Same for the question list. The question list would, if I clicked on that, it would open a PDF that would just have the questions itself. So it wouldn't actually have my responses. So again, the application pack would have the whole thing. So I'll head back. And I do, since again, this is related to your user account, since you have a user account associated with your email, and then there's an organization account that is kind of the umbrella for the organization itself. And so the reason I kind of call attention to that is you'll notice there's 2 separate sections of information here, some of which is duplicated. And that's because the applicant is me, myself, but since I'm an individual, confusingly enough, my organization also says my name. So in your case, I might have my applicant over here, and since I'm from Region 8 down in Martinsville, maybe it would say Art Sanctuary or whatever organization I'm representing. And you can edit those. So you'll notice there's a little pencil icon and edit anything that you need. There is this kind of strange quirk in the system that if you need to edit, I think I actually was on the other page. If you need to edit your address after you've added it the first time, you'll notice it's not in the edit section. Just shoot me an email. I'll get that updated for you. Okay, so I'm going to actually head to the apply page now, since we're kind of acquainted with the initial login. So on the apply page, this is all of our active applications at this time. You'll notice at the top, there is this funny little enter access code. You can ignore that because that's only when we have like special programs that maybe only have a handful of people. So, unless you've been told, you don't need to fool with it. So sorry, it's in the way. But you'll note at each section, there is both an apply button. Mine is grayed out for APS since I already started an application. But if you were new to it, you'll notice there's a blue apply on the same line as the name of the grant program. And then down at the bottom in that same box, I'm not a fan of the fact that they're not on the same line either, but the preview button, if I click into it, it's going to allow me to get kind of a general view of all of the questions themselves before I start diving in. You'll notice that there's this before you begin section that we do encourage everybody to read thoroughly before you even begin, because we do discuss guidelines, who to contact when you have questions, all of that goodness, including some of the things I'm talking about here in the old about the online system section. And part of why I wanted to pull up the preview section is it's a little misleading because you can actually type into the boxes here. But if you continue to type into the preview, unfortunately, it will not save on the application. If you ever find yourself in that situation where you've been filling out the preview, you scroll down and you realize, oh, there's not a submit application page or a button on this page. We would just encourage you to, whether it's open up a new tab, a new window on your internet browser so that you can copy and paste, or just paste them into a Word document so that you can then transfer it into the actual application. So just wanted to note, again, if I was in the preview, I'm not going to be able to actually save my progress. But if I click apply, and it's reminding me, Chick, you already started this. So I'm going to go into that. And now I can actually fill out the application itself. It's set up the same way as the question list, but a couple things I do just want to note before I pass it on again. You'll see that there are situations where we have what we call question branching, where there's a question that will prompt additional questions later in the application. So for example, if your project is actually going to be fiscally sponsored, so the organization that is wanting to apply isn't actually a 501c3, for example, so they get someone else to assist them, then you would click yes. Now, let's see, I'm going to cheat and use Control F and search for fiscal. Here we go. Aha. Now there is an expanded additional set of questions for the fiscal agent. Now, if you end up seeing that and you don't have a fiscal sponsor, then we mistakenly used question branching and didn't need to. So I don't have a fiscal agent. So I'll just scroll back up and say no, and I'll be able to continue on with my application. A couple of quick notes. In each section, you'll notice that we bold things that are specific to the question itself. We try to have helpful information in green, and anytime there's a link to head somewhere else, it's blue. So there's a little bit of a color coding system. When you're typing into the actual application, when I leave a box, you'll notice that as I'm typing, it's blue around it. When I leave it, it turns green, and that is showing me that, hey, we have saved this for you. But if you're like me and you'd rather make sure, triple sure that as you're going along, things are saved, there is a, down here at the bottom, there's a save application as well to submit. Let's see, other things that I want to point out quickly. There is occasionally red, and those are the, we really want you to pay attention to this note. And when it comes to uploads, let me scroll to a section that has that. Here. So with this marketing material section, you'll notice that when we have an upload, we also have a box. So sometimes you may need to make a notation about something that you're attaching. So you can type that in there, or if there's artist samples, for example, that might be, maybe it's a chance to put like a web link, because if you put a link in any of the attachments, the panelists won't actually be able to click it, even though we know usually PDFs would allow that. It's just something with this grant system. And will only be able to upload one file. So if you have multiple, you can use like a PDF merge system. They're free online, or just reach out to your rep or myself, and I'm happy to merge them for you. I'm gonna glance at my notes because I think I've noted most everything. Now I am going to pretend as though I'm ready to submit, and we know I have not filled out this application. Let's see what it tells us. So everything that I did not fill out is highlighted in red. So pretty much everything, except of course, when the tiny little green box of the grant name that I made. But it's helpful that the things that you didn't fill out, you'll notice that now that I scrolled up, it's highlighted there too. So I can make sure that, oops, I needed to include that. When I tab out, it'll turn green. Okay. And so ultimately I would be able to submit. And I think that covers it. But again, anytime you ever have questions, you're welcome to reach out to me. It's my name. Sign out here. My name and email is right there on the apply page, and it's in the guidelines as well. So good luck. And I think I'm forgetting at the moment who I'm passing it to. I'm passing it to Ailey.
That's right.
Take it away, my lady.
Thanks, Chapin. Hi, everybody. I'm Ailey McGill, and I'm the new Regional Arts Partner for Region 7. We just started at the beginning of this year, and so my organization, Nickel Plate Arts, is really excited to be able to play that role in the central part of the state here. And so I am here to talk to you about grant writing help and resources. And the great thing about this grant program is there really are a lot of resources to rely on. If you've never written a grant before, or if you've never written an arts grant before, there's a lot to look at and compare with. My first bit of advice is if you're a returning applicant, you should be able to access the recording and comments from your previous year. You can look in the system for your links and comments from previous years, and you can also reach out to your regional arts partner to help you find those. But that's a great way to help just sort of tweak your application. We definitely recommend that if you're applying year after year, you make those tweaks, you make sure you go back into the system and update your responses for this year's questions and priorities, and integrate that feedback that you've gotten in the past. We also want to remind you that we can review your applications for you. You just have to submit a request for that by the 23rd of this month so that we have plenty of time to get on our calendars and actually review things and get information back to you before the due date. So if you're somebody who feels a lot better about having another set of eyes on the application, or you have some specific questions, that's a great tool. If you're like me and you don't mind working on it up until the very last minute, that's cool too. You just may not be able to get our responses in time. Then we also clearly have webinars like this one that can help you look for or help you learn these tools. And There's also some great resources on the Arts Commission's website itself. If you look under the Arts Project Support tab on their website, there are going to be examples of previously funded projects that you can look at for ideas and examples. And there are other great resources there as well that can help you with some of the other sections of the application. There's a link embedded here to take you to those general grant writing tips as well. And those tips include things like, there are character counts on these for a reason. Now, on the one hand, you shouldn't let those character counts give you anxiety. You don't need to use every single character that's given to you. And if you feel like you have a lot more than what will fit in there, then you're probably telling more of the story than you need to. We're looking for you to be concise, to tell your story as quickly and as clearly as possible. Keep in mind that the reviewers are going to be reviewing sometimes a dozen or more additional applications. And so brevity and clarity are much appreciated in this process. You also are able to upload materials about your organization to help kind of flesh out your story. You can't assume that all of the reviewers know your organization or know your event. You should not assume that. And so make sure that you select materials that help supplement the story of your application, help us understand the big picture of your organization, and then can also help you take some pressure off of those word counts as you go. So we also just want to make sure that you know that there are resources for the community engagement section as well as the inclusion, diversity, equity, and access sections of your application. As Philip mentioned earlier, reach out to your partners. We highly recommend that you work on those collaborations and have those conversations before you turn your application in. We really want to make sure that those are solid connections and that there's a plan in place before you apply. And then again, on the ISA's website, there's some great resources. There's a whole, both a resources tab and a research tab, and both of those things can help you find additional information to flesh out these sections, especially when it comes to the IDEA section. There's some great research from around the state that's gathered there. Did I cover everything? I think now I'm turning it back to Paige. Is that right?
I believe so.
Well, take it away, Paige.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Of course, if there's the whole mute button thing. I'm sharing a couple other grant opportunities for y'all to be aware of. One is from Arts Midwest in their GIG Fund, otherwise known as Grow, Invest, and Gather. That application deadline is April 12th. And it's also arts project related, maximum request of around $2,500. So that's something to be aware of, as well as the National Endowment for the Arts has the Challenge America grant, which is due April 21st, which is also open to organizations who are looking for support for an arts project. So all the details that you would like to find out about are in the links that I provided. And I also want you to be aware that if you are not on our email list to receive our newsletters, and I highly encourage you to get on our email list, and you can do so at the link in.gov/arts/about/news. So other grant program availability coming up as well, and the newsletter will let you know about even more opportunities as they come to light. So fantastic job, partners. Thank you. And I guess if you guys have any questions and you want to chuck them in the chat box, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paige. We will open it up for questions, and then the slide on the screen has contact information for your regional arts partner and the map, so you can find your region if you're not familiar. Now, there were a couple questions we did have in the chat that I think we got answered, but please let us know if there are others, or reach out after. Today, we're happy to help.
This is Suzanne from Greencastle Area Arts Council. I guess one question I had was, how detailed do you want our budget to be? should it be more simplified, like just marketing, printing publications in just one figure? Or do you want to see that broken out where graphic design is separate, printing is separate, et cetera?
From my region, it does not need to be that detailed. If that is the amount you are spending on promoting the event, including printing and advertising, Facebook ads, whatever, that would all be one line. Where you might include that additional information, is in, again, the project timeline saying, we'll have Facebook ads start running this week or something like that.
Thank you.
Any others?
I have another one for Putnam County. Our demographics are such that I think it's something like 93.4% Caucasian. And we also are really fortunate that the newspaper has the popular edition of the newspaper is Tuesday because it goes to all households and businesses in Putnam County with a good address. So we're able to literally reach everyone in terms of sending out our press release, our announcement about the call for submissions. But the only thing that we were questioned about in our application, which was our first one was last year, was reaching out to a more diverse audience. And we felt we had reached really everyone, fortunately, as equitably as was possible. And one of the panelists reminded the others that we were in a rural area and we were already serving an underserved community. And so I'm kind of puzzling how to demonstrate that we have reached out as widely as possible.
Sorry, Susan. I was just going to say, sometimes panelists don't exactly know the demographic makeup of your specific county. So it's beneficial to really articulate, we have a lot of people from the rural community on our board. They help us plan these things. I think maybe being a little more detail oriented in your writing, if you're specifically describing which audiences or which communities you're wishing to serve, making sure you're explicitly stating who they are and how you're serving them or how they are working with you.
We were a little disappointed to receive that criticism because the first year we did it, it started as a COVID project and it's developed into a tradition that appears to be growing and has community support. And the first year we did it on a wing and prayer and just board members all pitched in to make it happen. And a woman who was Native American won it. And so we were real proud of her, but hadn't maybe as first-time applicants identified that in our application. So we felt we had, but then didn't quite know what to do in order to demonstrate that we had.
I think it's also probably important to point out that those panel discussions, we try to put panels together that are going to have a diversity of perspectives. And that doesn't mean that every comment they make is a roadmap for what your next application should be. It's just kind of those general things to think about. So I know I've interacted with a couple of groups who've gotten really focused on trying to address every single comment from the panel discussions. And that's not really necessary moving forward. It's just generally thinking about those big things. How are you welcoming new people to the community when, what is there a larger community effort to bring more diversity to the area? Just any of those things, make sure you've thought about them. And if they don't apply to your next application, I think that's okay.
Okay.
I think Susan, you have great questions. And I think they, are not just specific to Putnam County. I think you've been participating in the Arts for All series too, right? I think.
There's another team that
okay.
writes grants for DePaul University.
Okay.
And I'm representing the Greencastle Arts Council in the community and
Okay.
visual artist.
Well, the reason I ask is because we actually, in my discussion group, during the Arts for All presentations, we talked specifically about, yeah, I thought your name was familiar. Anyway, we're specifically talking about, well, I feel like we're putting all this information out to our community, right? We're trying to make sure they know we exist and that our doors are open to them. I think another layer then though upon that is, well, do they feel welcome there? That was kind of a big question we talked about last time. And so maybe if you can show, well, yes, we're making sure everyone has the information, but how else are you really including them in what you're doing?
That's a great series, by the way.
I was supposed to mention that series in my section and I skipped over it in my notes. So I've put the link to the registration form. If anybody hasn't signed up for the last Arts for All workshop, it's coming up next week. So you can register at that link in the chat.
And Susan, I'm always the cheerleader. I can't help it, but good for you for taking feedback and coming back around and reapplying. Many of us are grant writers, and I've been in this position before where I haven't received a grant on the first attempt, and then you step back, you evaluate, you discuss with your board, and you decide how best to proceed. So it's not easy to be in that position, and we really appreciate you coming back to the IC and looking for ways that we can work together. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to tag on, if I may, to what the previous speaker was saying. But before that, the arts for whatever the name, I've lost the name of the
Arts for All.
Yeah, it's been just one. I've gone to a lot of those kinds of things before, and this one has really moved me in ways that others have not. But that's not what I want. But talking about, so I run a strings festival. It's 2 days for kids in grades 6 through 12. And in Vigo County, essentially the only string students there are the students that are in the schools. You don't have a lot of kids who are taking private lessons or in youth orchestras at home, that sort of thing. So the population we pull from is decided upon by which children sign up for orchestra programs in their schools. So there is a sort of a systemic problem there that we would love to address, but is really outside what we feel like we can do. I mean, I've tried working with the people on the school corporation, but that hasn't made a lot of progress. Any suggestions there? I mean, if there's not much diversity in the children that pick orchestra, there's not going to be much diversity in the children that attend our festival.
Yeah, one thing that I would suggest, and I don't know how possible it is, but it's, who the compositions that you're teaching itself, are they by any diverse artists? That could help advance, it's not just the audience, it's the content. And then the audience might grow if the artists that are taught are more inclusive of different individuals. So that's something that you could explore. And I mean, we certainly understand sort of the limited box in which you're operating. But.
Yeah, we certainly try, and increasingly so, for the music that the children play is becoming increasingly diverse. So we make a concerted effort to have more women composers and more people of color composers, for them to work with.
That's fantastic. Well, then share that out.
Okay.
I think that folks want to be aware of that. They want to know that you're embracing diversity. That just the audience members, but more audience may result as just being more inclusive in that design. And that's definitely something important to share in your application, that you're celebrating those different cultures, so the students learn more, and maybe even some of the historical details to provide context to those composers in some way would help even advance the educational content as well for the students who may not all have access to that sort of framework as well. So
Thank you. That's a great suggestion.
Another note is that if this has opened up dialogue on diversity within the arts or diversity within arts education within your community, that's something that you could reference as well. We recognize that lots of things are building, and if you or your organization is helping us to address that or think about it or consider new ways, there's some value there as well.
Okay, thank you all so much. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to your regional arts partner if you have additional questions after this. Have a great afternoon. We can't wait to hear about your projects.